Thank you so much for joining in today's video. I would like to introduce terminal value to you. What is terminal value? Terminal value is basically the future value of a business beyond the explicit forecast period. What does it mean? Whenever you do modeling calculations, especially for valuation purposes, you look at the company and you do projections, year 1, year 2, year 3. You basically calculate and forecast your revenue, your cost structure, and you calculate your free cash flow. And you do this for a few years. Usually you have like one business cycle, depending on the industry and the company, 5, 7, 10 years. And this is where you do a kind of detailed forecast for every single year. But because the business operates indefinitely, you also want to know what the value is after those, let's say, 7 years. But you can't do the calculation forever. So that's where terminal value comes into play. It's called terminal value because it is the remaining value of a business after your explicit forecast period. Why do we need this? First, it captures long-term value. As said, many companies, they operate longer than your 5, 7, or 10 years. So you need to take this into consideration. Second, what you do from year 1 to year 2, all the way up to year 7, sometimes year 10, you can't continue this forever. You can't do those detailed projections, say, okay, now I do my year 128, 1949. You need to find a smarter way of calculating your cash flows. So it actually avoids endless projections. And then really important, because you think about a company that generates cash flows ideally forever, it is actually a major component of DCF calculations. And terminal value usually represents 50 to 75%. It loses a bit value because time value of money. So if cash is generated in 1,000 years, in today's term, it's not worth much. But given you are talking about so many years, there is a significant value in the terminal value. There are a few methods to calculate terminal value. The first one is called Gordon growth model, also called Perpetuity growth model, which is basically that your terminal value equals your free cash flow. I use free cash flow to the firm, doesn't matter in general, free cash flow in year T, which I will explain in a bit, times 1 plus your growth rate divided by your discount rate minus the same growth rate. Yeah, so this assumes that your terminal value and the free cash flows, basically that your free cash flows grow at a constant rate forever. Very important when you look at your explicit forecast period and you do revenue forecasting and you assume, I don't know, revenue is growing at 5, 6, 7% year over year or even 10%. This is a different G, that's a different growth rate. For the terminal value growth rate, we usually use a more pessimistic growth rate. We use, for example, 2% GDP growth, industry growth, long-term projections, 2-3%. We are not using figures such as 10%, 15%. So this G is not to be mixed up with your growth rate that you're using maybe from year 1 to year 2 or year 2 to year 3 for your projections. So be aware that this G is not the same G that you use for other calculation. If it's very high, then your terminal value will be very high, which is unrealistic. Your R is your discount rate, really depends on what type of cash flows you are looking for. If you look at free cash flows to the firm, then you know we are using WACC. If you are looking at an equity cash flow, free cash flow to equity holders, then you would use cost of equity only. Yeah, I'm always considering free cash flow to both capital providers, but here for illustration purposes, doesn't matter, R is your discount rate. So that is the first formula that you can use, and I show you an example in a bit Um, um, then what we have, so this is good to use, this formula is good to use when you have a stable business model that continues indefinitely, very suitable for mature industries, consumer goods, utilities. Exit multiple methods, that's another one where you basically use a financial metric and use it as a multiple. So the formula would be your terminal value equals projected metric times chosen multiple. Yeah, let's assume we use an EBITDA multiple. The pill needs to go here. That's your multiple, and then your matrix is as well EBITDA. Then you have your terminal. I will show you how to do that. So what does it mean? Or maybe before we do that, why do we use exit multiple? So you can use exit multiple if the industry has very good comparable companies with known valuation multiples, and if it's really hard to estimate a realistic perpetuity growth rate. You use this one, EBITDA multiple, many times for private equity and M&A deals. So what does it mean? Very simple illustrations. You have your explicit forecast period. In my example, I used 5 years, and then I assume the company grows indefinitely. You do your projections for year 1, 2, today we are here. So you do your projections for each year, your cost structure, and so on. Then hopefully, based on your EBIT, you do your adjustments. You add back D&A, you deduct CapEx, minus change in net working capital, taxes, and so on. So then hopefully you derive to a free cash flow in every single year. And what you then do is you basically discount it. Yeah, if we assume a WACC, let's assume a WACC at 10%, then you would discount this one, discount this one, discount this one, discount this one, and discount this one. Yeah, 120 divided by 1 plus WACC power 2, because we're in year 2, year 3, power to 3 with 170, year 4, and so on. So you would discount it. This is your explicit forecast period. You have 5 cash flows, 100, 120, 170, 150, 160. So if you would be doing this and you would bring them to the present value at 10%, then you would have approximately 500. Yeah, so then that's good. Then we have basically the business value for the first 5 years, which is 500. However, the business generates more cash flow after the explicit forecast period. So rather than doing all the projections again in year 6, 7, 8, 9, what we do is we use terminal value. And what we do is we try to estimate our year 6 terminal, or our year 6 free cash flow, which is quite easy, which is 160 times, so we are using the formula here, times 1 plus g times 1 plus g. If we use g like 2%, yeah, then 160 times 102. And then what we would do is divide it by r minus g, which is exactly 160 times 0.2 divided by, what did we say, 10% minus 2%, and so on. Yeah. Then what we get a value which is basically your terminal value here. Yeah, should be around, I think should be approximately 2000. Yeah, if we use this 500, this is approximately 2000. So what have you done with this terminal formula, terminal value perpetuity growth? You have used your free cash flow in year 5. This has been growing at 2%. And then you have used the perpetuity formula, which is this one, which is the one we had before. Free cash flow year 5, last year in your explicit forecast period times 1.02, like 2%, divided by your WACC minus 2%, because we assume constant growth. This is now, so this 2 million, or it's 2 million or 2 billion, this 2000 compared to the 500, is your value of all the cash flows in the future. Yeah, so all those cash flows are covered and captured by this number at this point in time, because you have used this cash flow here, 160 times 0.2. This is your year 6 cash flow. You have started your perpetuity here. Your perpetuity is started when you divide R minus G. You start your perpetuity here in year 6 using the year 5 cash flow. What you then need to do is this number, you need to discount again. Yes, you have discounted here already a little bit, looks like, but only to bring it back to year 6. You need to discount this 2000 again back to year 0. Yeah, so present value of terminal value equals divided by 1 plus WACC 6. And then you bring it back. Yeah, and I think if I'm not wrong, I've done it here before, should be something around 1.1. Yeah, 1.1 billion or 1,100. Yeah, doesn't really matter. Let's just say 500, 2,000. And then you see 500 compared to 1,100. That's what I said earlier. It's a big part of your valuation. So your terminal value, and then your total enterprise value in this case would be 1.6. Yeah, 500 plus 1,100. That's then your enterprise value. So this is a method using the Gordon growth model. If we do the same with exit multiple, then it's a bit different. We do all our cash flow forecast for our explicit forecast period, and then say for our terminal value, we don't care about free cash flows anymore. What we do, we look at EBITDA. EBITDA in year 5 was 200. And then we assume, for example, in this case, in this scenario, we assume if we use this formula that the industry trades at, for example, 6 times EBITDA. Then we know that all the industry competitors, if you want to buy them, they have a 6 times EBITDA multiple. So what we then do for our terminal value, we would use 200. That's our EBITDA in our horizon year, times our multiple. That's a multiple chosen multiple, 6 times EBITDA. That's an industry figure that you can get from FactSet, from additional analysis, but it's an external number, has nothing to do with your own business. It's more like at what EBITDA metric the industry trades, whether the industry is valued high or valued low. And then what you say is 200 times 6. That is your EBITDA multiple. EBITDA multiple for the industry equals, yeah, and then, okay, I made up this example, but it's approximately the same. Maybe it's different. You can use an average. Then you can look at, okay, where are the numbers coming from? But then you would do the same. You have your terminal value 1,200, and you would add with this, and then you have 1,700. Yeah, that's how you do it. So terminal value, very important that you check the free cash flow, the last free cash flow, quite important. So if you think about your projections and you end up and say, okay, 100, 120, 170, or I think this one is 850, potentially not. Really think about, has a big influence on what you do going forward. Your WACC needs to be point on, and then as said, the growth rate, it's a more conservative one, between 1 and 3% in line with GDP growth. And then you would get your terminal value. I hope you found this messy example useful. Thank you so much for listening. See you in another video. Bye bye.